Hi everyone, today's build video is my build for the Diecast Mafia Mud Bucket Challenge. For this I'm going to be using a Zuru metal machine smasher, also known as a bone crusher. So my idea for this build was to reuse the cab from my previous Warwick build, kind of inspired by a vehicle from a video game called Motorstorm Pacific Rift, as you'll be seeing on the screen. I'm pretty sure Hot Wheels also made a monster truck like this, but I couldn't find any images of it online, so I'm guessing I've just remembered the vehicle from the video game. Anyway, onto the build. Off camera I drilled out the base, and although I'm not going to be using the body for this car, I'm sure I can reuse the parts of it in a future build. So off to the bits box it goes. So here we have the cab from the Hot Wheels fuel and fire casting, and as you can see it almost fits to the chassis. Though I do need to trim it down around the fenders and the inner fenders because they catch on the front wheels. So using my sprue cutters I trimmed down the fenders. And then I used my hobby knife to clean up what I couldn't get with the sprue cutters. As you can see, the cab still doesn't fit. So I need to remove this part on the bottom of the interior piece. And after a quick test fit, it still didn't quite fit so well, so I removed these sections along the sides. Now as you can see it fits flush, which is much better. Next, since I've removed the original interior piece which would have held the axles in place, I need to kind of fix that. So for this I'm just going to use some pieces of styrene strip and glue them into place like so. Off camera I'll do the same for the rear axle. With the axles now firmly in place, I can glue the cab onto the chassis. So my original plan was to add the rear section of a car onto the back, similar to the Warwick and Furiosa, but after looking through my bits box I found this sleeper cab from another truck that I'd taken apart for a previous build ages ago. This will need a bit of trimming because it's got these tabs on the end. And now with these tabs removed it fits pretty much perfectly. I then cut some L-shaped styrene to glue to the chassis so that I can mount the sleeper cab on top of these. Off camera I cut a rectangle out of some styrene sheet to glue to the bottom of the sleeper cab. I also trimmed this down off camera. Still need to figure out what I'm going to do with the front of the sleeper cab because there's these two caps here. Not too sure if I'm going to add weapons sticking out of these or just fill the holes. Next I add this oil slick dropper from the Auto Kill Crash and Burn sprue. followed by this front bumper guard from the Chemstyle Designs police bumper guards, which I decided to mount upside down because it just looks better. I then decided to add this gun, which is from the Ramshackle Games 20mm car conversion set. Initially I thought about gluing it directly on top of the cab on this little rectangle piece, but felt it would look a little bit better if it was set into the sleeper cab. So I removed this little section here so I can put the gun inside. Now I need to build a platform for the gun to sit on. To do this, I trace around the sleeper cab onto some styrene sheet and then cut this piece out. Off camera, I kind of fiddled around to try and test fit it, and it was quite a bit of a tight squeeze, so instead of pulling it out and damaging it, I just glued it in place off camera. Next I wanted to add these 3D printed oil drums as fuel tanks, but I felt they set a little too low. Considering this is an off-road vehicle, they needed to sit a little higher, so off camera I cut a notch into them with my jeweler's saw. This allowed me to mount them much higher and give me a lot more ground clearance. Now it's time to attach the machine gun. To do this I'm going to use a peg system, so first I need to drill a hole into the base of the machine gun body. So I start by using my hobby knife to drill a pilot hole. Followed by drilling the hole with my pin drill. I also drill a hole into the sleeper cab's platform. Then cut some styrene rod for the post and attach it to the gun body. And again, I was test fitting this off camera and it kind of fit in place, and I didn't want to break anything, so I've just kind of left it and done it off camera. Next I decided to add mesh to the windows since they're so small and you won't really see a driver inside them, so instead of wasting one of my driver figures I can just add mesh and you won't really see into it. Following this, I add some heat shields to the exhausts using some styrene tube, which I cut and then split down the middle. So it'll easily slot over the top of the exhaust like so. I did originally try drilling holes into the heat shields, but it was very ununiformed and I didn't like the way it looked, so I just didn't use those ones. After this I wanted to add some armour to the wheels because they look like a pretty big target. So for this I used some styrene square rod. I wanted to make something similar to what you see in the later Mad Max films like Mad Max Fury Road and Furiosa. So I bent it into shape and then trimmed it down to make these little L-shaped pieces. I made a bunch of these off camera and then began attaching them like this. For the final part of the build, I add some steps to the fuel tanks to make it look like how they would get into this vehicle because it's so high up. Onto the painting, I do a quick prime off camera and then follow that up with some Revell Aquacolor Purple Red, linking this build to the Warwick that I previously built. I then use some homemade metallic blue for the sleeper cab. Following this, I apply a base coat of Revell Aquacolor Rust to everything that's going to be rusty metal. And then dry brush on top of that some Revell Aquacolor Metallic Steel or Aluminium to show that these parts are kind of rusted out. Off camera I paint all the little details. This is to not stretch out the painting section because I feel it can be quite boring. I then apply my homemade black wash to blend everything together and just give it that nice dirty wasteland look. Now this normally would be the last part of the painting, but this is the Mud Bucket challenge, so now it's time for me to paint on the mud, which is something I've not really done before, and for this I'm going to be using Revell Aquacolor Dark Earth. Now I didn't apply the black wash last because I felt that black wash would go over the top of the mud and it would ruin the look, so I painted the mud on last, and I'm hoping this kind of works out. To make it look a little bit more realistic, I apply some Revell Aquacolor Matte Black onto the raised part of the tread to show that the mud's been scraped off those sections of the tyre. So here we have the final build. I was a little worried how the mud effects would go, as I've never really done this before. I don't really have any of the textured mud paints, but I feel I've done an alright job. I'm sure there's plenty of room for improvement, but I was more worried of just making a mess of it, but I do feel it's turned out good. So as you can probably tell by now, I'm starting to get a taste for building these mashup style vehicles, which I've always felt look perfect for a post-apocalyptic creation, as you wouldn't have one working vehicle. You'd probably have several vehicles and you'd have to make something out of the parts available to you. But I've always shied away from doing this because if you ruin one car when you're building it, you've only ruined one. But if you have to cut up several cars and it doesn't go well, you've kind of potentially stopped yourself from being able to build several different vehicles. But I'm starting to get more confident in my skills at doing this. Hopefully you'll be seeing some larger scale builds like this in the future. Anyhow, please stick around for the glamour shots and the short animation. And as usual, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.